Picture a moment when the world transforms, not gradually, over generations, but suddenly, in the span of a single voyage. When everything humanity believed about the shape of existence changes forever. These moments are rare. Rarer still are the individuals who stand at their center, convinced of impossible truths that turn out to reshape reality itself. This is the story of one such moment and one such man, though not in the way you might expect. For the greatest discovery in human history was made by someone who died insisting he had found something else entirely. Consider what that means. The man who connected two hemispheres never knew he had done so. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if these history tales fascinate you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The city of Genoa in 1451 smells of wool and salt and ambition. In a modest workshop near the harbour, Domenico Colombo runs, his fingers across newly woven fabric, while his eldest son, Christopher, aged 10, watches ships arrive from worlds the boy can barely imagine. The harbour is alive with movement. Venetian galleys offload spices that have travelled from the Moluccas through a chain of merchants spanning 2 continents. Genoese vessels return from the Black Sea carrying silk that began its journey in distant Cathay. Portuguese caravels bring gold dust and strange tales from the African coast that's only just beginning to reveal its true extent. Young Christopher doesn't yet work the looms. He stands at the shop's entrance, listening. Every sailor carries stories of islands that appear on maps one year and vanish the next, of currents that sweep ships into unknown waters, of lands beyond the edge of Christian knowledge where men with dog heads dwell, or so the merchants claim. His father calls him back to work, but the boy's mind has already sailed beyond Genoa's walls. The Mediterranean in this moment is the center of the known world, yet it is dying. Constantinople fell to the Ottomans 3 years before Christopher's birth, and with it, the old Silk Road routes begin their slow strangulation. Every year, the price of Eastern goods climbs. Every year, European kingdoms grow more desperate for new paths to the wealth of Asia. The boy at the wool merchant's door cannot know this yet, but he is growing up in an age of profound geographic anxiety. Imagine the maps young Columbus might glimpse when merchants visit his father's shop. Medieval Mappae Mundi showing Jerusalem at the world's center, surrounded by a circular ocean. Portolan charts with their precise coastlines and rhumb lines for navigation, but blank spaces where cartographers can only write, "Here be dragons," or leave the parchment empty. Ptolemy's geography, recently recovered from Greek manuscripts, suggesting the world is round, but calculating its circumference at 18,000 miles, 7,000 miles too small. This error will change everything. By age 14, Christopher is sailing. Short voyages at first, coastal trading runs that teach him to read the stars and feel a ship's response to wind and current. He learns the language of the sea, how waves reveal distant storms, how birds signal land beyond the horizon, how watercolor shifts above different depths. He is not yet a master sailor, but the sea is becoming his true education, far more than the minimal reading and writing he acquires. The Genoese merchant fleet takes him across the Mediterranean. He sees Chios, where mastic resin is harvested, stands on the docks of Tunis, where Italian traders negotiate with Berber merchants for Saharan gold, watches sunset from Rhodes, where the ancient Colossus once stood. Each port expands his understanding of the world's complexity and his own place within it. He is tall for his time, perhaps 5 feet 7 inches, with reddish hair that will turn white before he reaches 30. His face burns easily in Mediterranean sun. People who meet him remember his eyes, intense, restless, absolutely convinced. Then comes 1476. Columbus is 25, serving on a Genoese convoy when French privateers attack off Cape St. Vincent. His ship catches fire. The young sailor grasps an oar and kicks away from the burning vessel, swimming 6 miles through cold Atlantic water to the Portuguese coast. He washes ashore near Lagos, half drowned, beginning a new chapter entirely by accident. Or perhaps by fate. Columbus will later claim God's hand guided him through that water, preserving him for a greater purpose. Portugal, in 1476, is the cutting edge of European exploration. For 60 years, Portuguese captains have been pushing down Africa's western coast, each voyage extending the known world southward. Prince Henry the Navigator died 16 years ago, but his vision persists. Portuguese shipyards build revolutionary caravels that can sail closer to the wind than any vessel before them. Portuguese navigators map currents and trade winds with scientific precision. The Portuguese crown guards its maritime knowledge jealously, making it death to reveal charts or navigation techniques to foreign powers. Columbus makes his way to Lisbon. He finds work, joins his brother Bartholomew, who works as a map maker, and begins absorbing everything this maritime empire has learned. He studies charts showing the African coast extending far south of the equator, though how far, the Portuguese still don't know. He hears returning captains speak of doldrums near the equator where ships sit becalmed for weeks, of currents that flow in vast circular patterns, of steady winds that blow from east to west in certain latitudes. The Portuguese are looking for a sea route to Asia around Africa. Every educated person knows the world is round. That ancient argument was settled long ago. The question is how to reach the east by water, avoiding the Ottoman stranglehold on overland routes. Bartholomew Dias will round Africa's southern cape in 1488. Vasco da Gama will reach India by 1498. But in 1476, the African route remains unclear, and another possibility occupies Christopher Columbus's increasingly obsessed mind. What if you sailed west instead? He begins reading everything he can find. Pierre Daly's Imago Mundi, Image of the World, becomes his Bible. This compendium of geographic knowledge, written in 1410, collects and analyzes ancient sources. Columbus acquires a copy and begins making marginal notes. 400 notes eventually, arguing with Daly, agreeing with certain interpretations, building a case. He reads Marco Polo's description of his journey to Kublai Khan's court, reads Ptolemy's geography with its fateful underestimate of Earth's size, reads Toscanelli's letter to the Portuguese crown proposing a westward voyage. Consider how an idea takes shape in a driven mind. Columbus begins with an error, Ptolemy's circumference that makes Earth smaller than it is. He compounds it by accepting Daly's argument that Asia extends farther east than it does. He adds Marco Polo's exaggerations of the distance from China's coast to Japan. He calculates that Cipangu, Japan, lies merely 2,400 miles west of the Canary Islands. This is catastrophically wrong. The actual distance is over 12,000 miles. But Columbus's arithmetic, faulty as it is, makes a westward voyage seem possible. Imagine him by candlelight, drawing and redrawing his calculations. The Atlantic becomes not an obstacle but an opportunity, a shortcut to the wealth of the East. He becomes convinced not just that this could work, but that he is destined to prove it. His faith intensifies. He reads biblical passages suggesting Earth's ocean covers less of the globe than scholars believe. He interprets prophecies from the book of Isaiah as applying to himself. A mysticism begins, interweaving with his geography, dangerous and powerful. Then comes 1479. Columbus marries Filipa Moniz Perestrello, daughter of a Portuguese noble family. This is a significant step up for a foreign wool merchant's son. Through this marriage, he gains access to his dead father-in-law's papers, navigation charts, and journals from Porto Santo, an island in the Madeiras where the elder Perestrello served as captain. These documents change everything. The charts show mysterious islands, islands that Portuguese captains have reported seeing in Atlantic mists. Antillia, where 7 Portuguese bishops supposedly fled during the Moorish invasion, establishing 7 cities of gold. St. Brendan's Isle, where the legendary Irish monk found paradise. Brazil, appearing and disappearing on successive voyages. These phantom islands populate European maps, their locations constantly shifting because no one can reliably find them twice. But, to Columbus, they suggest something crucial, that land exists in the Western Atlantic, stepping stones to Asia. He sails to Porto Santo, lives there with his wife and newborn son Diego. From this Atlantic outpost, he hears more stories of carved wooden objects washing ashore, worked by unknown hands, of peculiar plants after western storms, of bamboo canes so thick no European variety matches them, of the bodies of 2 men found on Flores Island, broad-faced and strange, like no people seen before. Most dismiss these as sailors' fancies. Columbus collects them as evidence. In 1482, Columbus sails south to West Africa aboard a Portuguese merchant vessel. This voyage teaches him the Atlantic wind system that will make his later journey possible. Sailing south from Portugal, they catch the Portuguese Volta do Mar, the turn of the sea, a circular route taking them southwest into the Atlantic before turning southeast toward Africa. This arc avoids headwinds and uses currents discovered decades ago. On the return, they sail northeast, catching different winds. Columbus feels it. The Atlantic breathes in patterns. Winds blow steadily from the east in southern latitudes, blow from the west in northern latitudes. Currents circle in vast gyres. The ocean is not chaos but a system, predictable for those who learn its rhythms. Sailing west somewhere around the Canaries, he realizes, would carry you onward with steady following winds. The return would require sailing north to catch westerlies. It becomes obvious to him, not just possible, inevitable. Stand with Columbus on that African voyage as he watches Portuguese traders exchange iron tools for gold dust and ivory. The Portuguese have established feitorias, trading posts, down the African coast. They bring horses, metal goods, textiles. They take gold, slaves, pepper. It is not yet the massive slave trade that will devastate Africa. That horror grows after Columbus's voyages prove the Atlantic can be routinely crossed. But the pattern is establishing itself. European ships bearing manufactured goods, African or Asian lands yielding raw wealth, trade routes as instruments of power. Columbus returns to Lisbon with his understanding crystallized. He will propose a westward voyage to the Portuguese crown. He prepares his case carefully. Maps showing Asia's supposed proximity, citations from Daly and Polo, mathematical calculations, AZ, wrong but internally consistent, testimonies about western islands and strange objects on Atlantic shores. He requests ships, crew, and a promise that he will govern any lands discovered and receive 1/10 of all wealth obtained. It is an extraordinary demand from a foreign mariner, but Columbus believes absolutely in his destiny. 1484. Columbus appears before King John II of Portugal. The king is interested. Portugal leads European exploration, and a westward route to Asia would be the ultimate achievement. John convenes his Junta dos Matemáticos, committee of mathematicians, to evaluate Columbus's plan. These are the finest minds in Portuguese navigation. They study his calculations. They confer. They reach their conclusion. Columbus is wrong. The mathematicians calculate Earth's true size. Asia lies not 3,000 miles west, but at least 12,000. No ship of this era can carry enough provisions for such a voyage. The crew would die of thirst and starvation long before reaching any land. The Atlantic is far vaster than Columbus believes. He is, they politely inform the king, either confused or mad. King John thanks Columbus for his proposal. Portugal will continue seeking the African route. The Genoese navigator is welcome to remain in Lisbon, but his western voyage will not receive Portuguese backing. It is a crushing rejection, made worse because the mathematicians are absolutely correct. Columbus's calculations are garbage. Asia is indeed 12,000 miles distant. His entire geographic framework is wrong. But here stands one of history's strangest ironies. Columbus is wrong about everything except the essential fact. He believes Asia lies nearby in the Western Ocean. It does not. However, something else does. Two continents holding civilizations he never imagines. Entire hemispheres of land populated by 30 million people. His error will lead him to the greatest geographic discovery in human history, while he dies insisting he found something entirely different. Columbus refuses to accept defeat. His wife dies, leaving him with young Diego. Unburdened, increasingly desperate, he begins years of wandering across Europe's royal courts. His brother Bartholomew travels to England and France, carrying proposals for the westward voyage. Christopher himself will soon turn towards Spain, where Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand are locked in their final war to drive Muslim rulers from Granada. Perhaps, Columbus thinks, they might be interested in a new route to Asian wealth. The Atlantic wind still blows steady from the east. The Phantom Islands still haunt Portuguese charts. And in Lisbon, a tall, red-haired man with burning eyes packs his few belongings and his precious annotated books, preparing to try again. He has been rejected by the greatest maritime power on earth. His calculations have been proven wrong by the finest navigators alive. He has no wealthy patrons, no ships, no crew. But he has something more dangerous than any of those. He has absolute certainty, the kind of conviction that can move mountains or drown kingdoms. The kind of faith that reshapes the world even when, especially when, it rests on foundations of error and dream. Watch him leave Lisbon, his son's hand in his. The Atlantic stretches west beyond the horizon. Somewhere out there, he believes, Asia waits. He will sail to it. God has shown him the path. The scholars are wrong, the mathematicians mistaken. He will prove them all wrong, or die, trying. He cannot know that he is right and wrong simultaneously, that Asia does not wait where he believes, but that the voyage he imagines will still connect worlds and reshape human history beyond anything he can conceive. That his certainty, though built on error, will carry him across an ocean that would defeat any man with a more accurate understanding of its true size. The seed is planted, the dream takes root, and the world, utterly unaware, stands at the edge of transformation. Spain in 1485 is a nation on the verge of completion. For 700 years, Christian kingdoms have been pushing Muslim rulers southward down the Iberian Peninsula in what they call the Reconquista, the reconquest. Now only Granada remains, the last Muslim stronghold, its Alhambra palace gleaming red against Sierra Nevada mountains. Queen Isabella of Castile and King Ferdinand of Aragon have united their kingdoms through marriage and turned their combined attention toward this final prize. Every ducat, every soldier, every ounce of royal attention focuses on Granada's siege. Into this war-consumed kingdom walks Christopher Columbus, widowed and desperate, his 6-year-old son Diego in tow. He carries his annotated books, his faulty calculations, and his unshakable conviction. Spain is not his first choice. Portugal rejected him. England and France barely listened. But Spain is available, and availability matters when you're running out of options. Columbus secures an introduction to the Spanish court through Antonio de Marchena, a Franciscan friar who shares his mystical interpretation of geography. It's a beginning, however tenuous. Understand what Columbus is proposing. He wants 3 ships, crews to sail them, and provisions for a year. He wants the title Admiral of the Ocean Sea, hereditary and permanent. He wants governorship of all lands discovered. He wants 1/10 of all wealth obtained from these territories, for himself and his heirs forever. And he wants all this to sail toward what he claims is Asia, which learned men know lies impossibly far across an empty ocean. It is, by any reasonable measure, insane. The Duke of Medinaceli provides initial support, housing Columbus for 2 years. But the Duke grows cautious. Funding such an expedition might offend the Crown, who guards exploration rights jealously. Columbus must approach Isabella and Ferdinand directly. In 1486, he finally gains an audience at Alcalá de Henares, where the royal court has temporarily settled during the Granada campaign. Picture that first meeting. Columbus, tall and weather-worn, his hair prematurely white, his eyes intense with conviction. Isabella, 35 years old, shrewd and pious, managing a kingdom at war while juggling complex political alliances. Ferdinand, calculating and practical, suspicious of foreign adventurers bearing expensive dreams. Columbus presents his case: the distance to Asia, the steady winds that will carry ships westward, the phantom islands marking the route, the biblical prophecies suggesting God intends Spain to reach the east by a new path. Isabella is intrigued, but not convinced. She refers Columbus to a commission of scholars and navigators. Let the experts evaluate his proposal. The commission will meet at Salamanca, home to Spain's greatest university. Columbus must present his case to men who have studied geography, mathematics, and astronomy their entire lives. He is a largely self-taught sailor, arguing against the Spanish Empire's finest minds. The commission convenes. Columbus faces Hernando de Talavera, Isabella's confessor, and a brilliant theologian. Diego de Deza, professor of theology at Salamanca. Pedro Gutiérrez, courtier and royal accountant. Rodrigo Maldonado, advisor on legal matters. And multiple mathematicians and cosmographers whose names history has forgotten but whose knowledge of geography far exceeds Columbus's flawed understanding. Imagine those meetings through 1486 and into 1487. Columbus explaining Ptolemy's circumference, while scholars point out more accurate calculations by Eratosthenes and Alfagani. Columbus citing Marco Polo's distance from China to Japan, while experts note that Polo's measurements are unreliable, his book filled with exaggerations and second-hand tales. Columbus presenting his calculations showing Asia lies 2,400 miles west, while mathematicians demonstrate patiently and then with growing frustration that the true distance exceeds 12,000 miles. The commission is not hostile. They are not narrow-minded. They are simply correct. Every scientific calculation they make proves Columbus wrong. Worse, they understand what such a voyage would mean. 3 years of sailing through empty ocean. If Columbus's calculations held, which they don't, no ship can carry enough food and water for that duration. Even if the crew survived the outbound journey, they could never return. It would be suicide, pure and simple. Consider the Commission's position. They are not rejecting exploration or innovation. Portugal's success with African routes proves they appreciate maritime discovery. They are rejecting a voyage based on demonstrably false geography that would kill everyone involved. It's not prejudice or fear, it's competence. Columbus refuses to modify his position. He cannot, because he believes with religious certainty that God has revealed this path to him. When scholars prove his mathematics wrong, he responds with mystical arguments. When they demonstrate Earth's true size, he cites obscure biblical passages. His conviction becomes its own form of evidence in his mind. He knows because he knows. Faith trumps mathematics. The commission deliberates for 4 years. 4 years while Columbus waits, increasingly desperate, surviving on occasional stipends from the crown and lodging from sympathetic friars. 4 years while his son Diego grows from 6 to 10, wondering when his father's obsession will yield results. 4 years while the Granada campaign continues, draining Spain's treasury and monopolizing royal attention. During this waiting period, Columbus's brother, Bartholomew, reaches England. King Henry VII listens to the proposal. England sits on the Atlantic's edge, perfectly positioned for westward voyages. But Henry is cautious with money, his kingdom still recovering from civil war. The proposal seems expensive and uncertain. He declines politely. Bartholomew travels to France. King Charles VIII is even less interested. France faces its own political complications, and westward voyages rank far below immediate concerns. Back in Spain, Columbus grows increasingly worn. He is approaching 40, old for a sailor of this era. His hair has gone completely white. His face shows the weathering of years at sea and years of waiting in draughty royal chambers. He makes and loses patrons. Some nobles find him compelling, mad but possibly inspired. Others think him simply mad. He borrows money and cannot repay it. He sends Diego to live with relatives, unable to properly care for his son while chasing royal audiences. Then, late in 1487, the Salamanca Commission delivers its verdict. The commission concludes that Columbus's proposed voyage is impossible. The distance to Asia exceeds any ship's capacity to traverse. His calculations rest on faulty geography. His biblical interpretations are unconvincing. They recommend that their majesties decline funding. It is a comprehensive rejection, based on impeccable reasoning. Columbus should accept defeat. Every rational path leads to abandoning this quest. He has been proven wrong by the era's greatest experts. He has no other royal courts left to approach. He has no money, no ships, no credible support. The sensible response would be finding stable employment, raising his son, accepting that. Some dreams cannot be realized. But Columbus is not a sensible man. He is a man possessed by certainty. He begins lobbying for a second hearing. He seeks new patrons who might influence the crown. He prays and interprets every coincidence as divine signs supporting his cause. His conviction does not waver. It intensifies. The more he is rejected, the more certain he becomes that God has chosen him for this mission. Rejection becomes proof of his special destiny. Obstacles become tests of faith. Consider this psychology. How does a person maintain absolute belief when all evidence proves them wrong? Columbus manages it through a fusion of mysticism and selective reasoning. He rereads his annotated books, finding new passages supporting his views while ignoring contradictions. He interprets prophecies from Ezekiel and Isaiah as personal messages about his mission. He becomes convinced that reaching Asia by sailing west will fund a new crusade to recapture Jerusalem, a apocalyptic vision driving his geographic obsession. Meanwhile, the Granada War reaches its climax. By 1491, after 10 years of siege, Granada's Sultan agrees to surrender. On January 2nd, 1492, Ferdinand and Isabella enter the Alhambra as Muslim banners come down and Christian crosses rise. The Reconquista is complete. Spain, unified and victorious, suddenly has attention and resources for other ventures. Columbus makes one final desperate appeal. He has been waiting in Spain for 7 years now. 7 years of rejection, poverty, and postponement. His son, Diego, is 14. Having spent half his childhood watching his father beg for ships, Columbus requests an audience at Santa Fe, the military camp outside Granada where the royal court celebrates victory. Isabella and Ferdinand receive him. They remember his proposal from years ago, but their answer remains no. The scholars proved him wrong. The voyage is too expensive and unlikely to succeed. Columbus has one card left to play, his pride. He makes it clear he will accept nothing less than his original terms. Admiral of the Ocean Sea, Governor of all lands found, 1/10 of all wealth obtained. These extraordinary titles and rewards, or nothing. It is a negotiating tactic born of desperation. But Ferdinand and Isabella, fresh from their Granada triumph and unwilling to haggle with a foreign sailor, tell Columbus no one final time. He is dismissed from court. His quest has ended. Columbus leaves Santa Fe in January 1492. He rides toward Cordoba, planning to depart Spain entirely. Perhaps France will reconsider. Perhaps he can return to Portugal and beg King John for another hearing. The mission isn't over, he tells himself, just this particular attempt. But his heart knows otherwise. He is 40, white-haired, exhausted, and broken. The dream that has consumed half his life is dying. At a bridge 2 leagues from Santa Fe, a royal messenger overtakes Columbus. Luis de Santangel, keeper of Ferdinand's privy purse, has intervened. Santangel is a converso, a Jew converted to Christianity, serving as the crown's finance minister. He has listened to Columbus's proposal before and heard something others missed. Not the faulty geography, but the underlying gamble. What if Columbus is right? Not about the distance, perhaps, but about finding something valuable in the Western Ocean? Santangel makes a passionate case to Isabella. The cost is minimal compared to Granada's siege expenses. 3 small ships, provisions, and crew salaries for a few months. If Columbus fails, Spain loses little. But if he succeeds, if he finds any new route to wealth, any islands, any new lands, Spain gains everything. It is a lottery ticket with acceptable risk and potentially infinite reward. Moreover, Santangel offers to arrange private financing. The crown need not even draw from the royal treasury. Consider Isabella's position in this moment. She is exhausted from 10 years of war. Her kingdom is heavily in debt. She has just expelled or forced conversion of Spain's Jewish population, creating immediate economic disruption. And here is her finance minister, himself a converso, offering to personally arrange funding for a venture that might, just might, provide new wealth to replenish depleted coffers. Isabella agrees. Send a messenger. Bring Columbus back. They will negotiate terms. Columbus returns to Santa Fe to find everything changed. The impossible has occurred. Spain will fund his voyage. On April 17th, 1492, Columbus and the Spanish crown sign the capitulations of Santa Fe. These documents grant Columbus everything he demanded. He becomes Admiral of the Ocean Sea, a hereditary title. He receives governorship and viceroyship of all lands he discovers. He gets 1/10 of all gold, silver, pearls, spices, and other merchandise obtained from these territories. His heirs inherit these rights and revenues forever. It is the most extraordinary contract ever granted to an explorer. Columbus, the rejected dreamer who was proven wrong by every expert who examined his plans, has won everything. He did not win through being correct. His geography remains catastrophically flawed. He won through persistence, faith, and one man's willingness to take a calculated risk with money that wasn't technically his to risk. Stand with Columbus as he reads these documents. 8 years of rejection have ended. Portuguese courts that dismissed him, English indifference, French disinterest, Spanish scholars who correctly proved him wrong, all of it overcome, not through better arguments but through outlasting defeat until circumstances aligned with his obsession. But examine what he has actually achieved. He has permission for one voyage, that's all. If he sails west and finds only empty ocean, he returns disgraced and his titles mean nothing. If he dies at sea, as the Salamanca mathematicians predicted, his contract dies with him. Everything depends on what lies in the western Atlantic. Columbus believes he knows Asia, with all its wealth and glory. The scholars believe they know nothing but thousands of miles of water until a starving crew perishes. Neither imagines the truth, that Columbus will indeed find land across the Western Ocean, that this land will be neither empty nor Asian, that 30 million people already inhabit these shores, living in civilizations complex and ancient, utterly unaware that a white-haired Genoese sailor has just signed a contract making him their governor and giving him 1/10 of their wealth, that the next voyage will begin a collision of hemispheres that will kill tens of millions and reshape every continent. The contract is signed. The impossible gamble is approved. Now comes the harder part, transforming parchment promises into actual ships, crew, and provisions. Columbus has 90 days to make ready, 90 days to find a port willing to support this madness, 90 days to recruit sailors willing to sail off the world's edge, because that's what they'll believe they're doing. The dream that should have died 1,000 times lives on, wrong in its geography, wrong in its calculations, wrong in its assumptions about what waits across the ocean, but right, somehow, in its insistence that the voyage is possible and that something world-changing waits beyond the horizon. Watch Columbus leave Santa Fe with his signed documents. He has defeated every obstacle through sheer refusal to accept defeat. He has won despite being proven wrong. He rides toward the coast, toward the small port of Palos that will give him ships, toward a future that will fulfill none of his expectations while exceeding every possible dream. The world is about to crack open, and the man who will crack it doesn't even know what he's breaking. The port of Palos de la Frontera sits on Spain's southwestern coast where the Tinto River meets the Atlantic. It is not a grand harbour. No royal shipyards line its docks. No marble warehouses store eastern spices. Palos is a working port of fishing vessels and small merchants, home to perhaps 2,000 souls who make their living from the sea. And Palos has a problem. The town owes the Spanish crown a debt, 2 fully equipped caravels as punishment for some maritime offence now forgotten by history. Columbus arrives in May 1492 carrying royal letters commandeering this debt for his expedition. The town must provide 2 ships. The third, Columbus will hire himself. Palos receives this news with all the enthusiasm of men being conscripted for suicide. Consider what Columbus is asking. He needs 3 ships capable of ocean crossing. He needs 90 sailors willing to sail beyond sight of land for weeks, possibly months. He needs provisions, water casks, spare sails, rope, tools, weapons, trade goods. He needs all of this ready to depart in 90 days. And he needs it from a town that regards his entire enterprise as insanity. The local priest, Juan Perez, helps. He knows Columbus from earlier visits and believes in the mission's divine purpose, if not its geography. More importantly, he knows the Pinzon family, prominent mariners who command respect in Palos and surrounding villages. If the Pinzons join this voyage, others will follow. Without them, Columbus will never fill his cruise. Martin Alonso Pinzon is 44, a wealthy ship captain and navigator who has sailed to Africa and across the Mediterranean. His younger brother, Vicente Yáñez Pinzon, 32, is equally experienced. These are not desperate men seeking adventure. They are established mariners with reputations to protect. When Columbus approaches them with his proposal, Martin initially refuses. Everyone in maritime circles knows Columbus's geography is wrong. The Salamanca scholars published their findings, but Columbus has something new to offer now: royal approval and an extraordinary contract. 1/10 of all wealth found goes to Columbus, yes, but the remaining wealth will be distributed among the crown and the expedition members. Columbus talks of Asian gold, of Marco Polo's accounts of Cipangu where palace roofs are covered in gold leaf, of spices worth more than their weight in silver, of pearls the size of hazelnuts. He promises Martin a share of command and 1/8 of the profits from his own 10th. Martin Alonso Pinzon changes his mind not because Columbus's geography improves, but because the potential reward justifies the risk. If they find anything of value, even just useful islands for future expeditions, the payoff will be enormous. And if they die at sea, well, every sailor lives with that possibility. Martin agrees to join as captain of the Pinta. Vicente will captain the Niña. With the Pinzon brothers committed, recruitment begins. Watch the transformation of Palos through June and July 1492. Word spreads that the Pinzons have joined Columbus's expedition. Sailors who wouldn't give Columbus a second glance suddenly reconsider. If Martin Pinzon believes the voyage possible, perhaps it is. Crews begin assembling. Not 90 volunteers immediately. Recruitment is slow, reluctant, driven by promises of Asian gold and the Pinzon reputation. 3 ships take shape. The Santa Maria, Columbus's flagship, is actually named La Gallega, the Galician. But Columbus rechristens her after the Virgin Mary. She is a nau, a larger cargo vessel of perhaps 100 tons burden, slower but capacious. She is not ideal for exploration, her deeper draft unsuited for coastal work, but she is what Columbus can afford to hire. The Pinta and Niña are caravels, smaller and nimbler at perhaps 60 tons each, the type of vessel that has made Portuguese exploration successful. The Niña has lateen sails when first provided, triangular sails hung from long yards, excellent for sailing into, wind but slower when running before it. Columbus insists these be changed to square sails for Atlantic crossing, where following winds will predominate. This modification consumes precious weeks. The Pinta's rudder shows weakness during sea trials. It must be repaired and reinforced. Every delay increases costs and tests the patience of assembling crews. Provisions are calculated carefully. Water and wine in casks, enough for 90 men for 6 months, though Columbus tells his crew they'll reach Asia in a month. Ship's biscuit, hardtack, that can survive long voyages without spoiling. Salted meat and fish, dried beans and rice, olive oil, garlic and onions, dried figs, honey. The menu is monotonous but sufficient to prevent scurvy if the voyage doesn't last too long. Columbus has no idea how long the voyage will actually take, since his distance calculations are wrong, but he provisions for longer than his stated expectations. Weapons come aboard. Crossbows and swords for defense, primitive firearms, arquebuses that are as dangerous to their users as their targets, armor for officers. These are not warships, but they sail toward unknown waters where hostile forces might exist. Trade goods fill the holds: glass beads, brass bells, red caps, brass rings, small mirrors. The sort of items that dazzled people unfamiliar with European manufacturing. Columbus expects to trade these trinkets for Asian spices and gold. The crew assembles slowly, reluctantly. 90 men eventually agree to sail. Most are Spanish, from Palos and nearby ports. Some are veterans of Mediterranean voyages, others simple fishermen seeking fortune. 4 men serve prison sentences and accept this voyage as alternative punishment. not hardened criminals, but men caught in minor offences who prefer uncertain danger to certain imprisonment. The crew includes an interpreter, Luis de Torres, who speaks Hebrew, Arabic, and Aramaic, and languages Columbus believes will be understood in Asia. Picture these men through late July and early August. They load provisions and inspect rigging. They hear Mass and confess their sins, believing they might not return. Families gather at the docks, wives and children watching fathers and sons prepare for an expedition everyone else in Europe has called impossible. Some men back out at the last moment, their courage failing. The Pinzon brothers recruit replacements, sometimes forcefully. Columbus maintains 2 logbooks during these preparations. One will record actual distances travelled for his own navigation. The other will show lesser distances to prevent crew panic as they sail farther from home than any of them have travelled before. This deception is calculated and necessary in Columbus's mind. The crew doesn't need accurate information. They need enough information to stay calm and obedient. Truth becomes a luxury that might cause mutiny. August 2nd, 1492. The Spanish crown issues its edict, expelling all Jews from Spain who refuse Christian conversion. Tens of thousands flee. Ships depart, Spanish harbours carrying refugees to Portugal, North Africa, and Italy. Palos's harbour fills with vessels loading desperate passengers alongside their possessions. The same day, Columbus makes his final preparations. He confesses his sins one last time, writes letters to his sons Diego and Fernando, signs documents ensuring his family will receive his titles and wealth should he die at sea. August 3rd, 1492. Dawn breaks over Palos. The harbour is crowded with refugee ships and fishing vessels, but 3 ships stand ready for something different. The Santa Maria, the Pinta, and the Nina. 87 men aboard in total, not 90, as a few last-minute desertions reduced the count. Columbus, 41 years old with white hair and weathered face, boards the Santa Maria wearing black robes, as is his custom. The Pinzon brothers take their positions on their respective vessels, stand on that dock as 3 ships cast off lines. Half the town has gathered despite the early hour. Families wave farewell, many certain they're watching their men sail to death. Priests bless the vessels. Children cry. Columbus stands at the Santa Maria's stern, watching Palos recede, watching Spain grow small, watching the last familiar land disappear behind them. The 3 ships sail south initially, making for the Canary Islands. This is the standard route. Resupply at Spain's last Atlantic outpost before attempting the ocean crossing. The voyage to the Canaries is routine, but problems emerge immediately. The Pinta's rudder shows weakness again. The Nina's lateen sails prove unsuitable for open ocean, just as Columbus predicted. They reach Gran Canaria on August 9th, and Columbus makes repairs through late August and early September. These delays are fortunate, though Columbus doesn't see it that way. While stuck in the Canaries, his crew grows accustomed to ocean sailing. The ships are tested and improved. The Nina receives new rigging with square sails. The Pinta's rudder is properly fixed. Provisions are topped off with fresh water and local supplies. By September 6th, when they finally depart the Canaries heading due west, the expedition is better prepared than when it left Palos. Imagine that moment of departure from Gomera, westernmost of the Canary Islands. Columbus sets course 270 degrees, due west. Behind them, the volcanic peaks of the Canaries. Ahead, nothing but ocean and sky. The crew has never sailed so far from land. Most have never lost sight of shore for more than a few days. They are about to spend more than a month surrounded only by water. The Atlantic wind blows steady from the east. The trade winds, though Columbus doesn't call them that yet. These winds will carry the three ships westward at approximately 150 miles per day, faster than anyone expected. The weather is extraordinary. Warm sun, following winds, calm seas. The ocean seems to welcome them. The ships make excellent progress, but inside each sailor's mind, fear grows with every league travelled. They are sailing off the known world. The distance to Asia, even by Columbus's faulty calculations, exceeds any voyage any of them have made. Every day takes them farther from any possibility of rescue if something goes wrong. Every sunset watched from a ship surrounded by endless water reinforces their isolation. Columbus writes in his logbook each day. He records wind direction, speed, weather, sea conditions. He calculates distances traveled. And he maintains his deception, showing the crew lesser distances than they've actually covered. When they've sailed 400 miles, he tells them 300. The lie is meant to prevent panic, but it also reveals Columbus's understanding of his crew's psychology. They are terrified, and honest information would make them more so. 3 ships sail west across an ocean Europeans have barely explored. 87 men sleeping in cramped quarters, eating salted meat and hardtack, watching endless water pass beneath their keels. They don't know that land actually does lie ahead, much closer than Asia, but much stranger than anything they imagine. They don't know that Columbus's impossible quest will succeed in a way that makes his faulty geography irrelevant. They only know they're sailing toward what every reasonable person insists is suicide, and they're doing it anyway, because the Pinzon brothers believed, because Columbus promised Asian gold, because royal documents authorized this madness. Watch the 3 ships grow small against the immense Atlantic. Watch Spain disappear completely below the eastern horizon. Watch the sun set into water that stretches unbroken to what they believe is Earth's edge. The voyage has begun. There is no turning back without wind to carry them home. Forward is the only direction left. Into the unknown, into terror, into history. September 7th, 1492. The Canary Islands disappear below the eastern horizon. For the first time in their lives, Columbus's crew cannot see land in any direction, only water. Water extending to the curve of the world in every direction. Water deeper than anyone can measure. Water hiding whatever might live in its depths. The first days are deceptively pleasant. Trade winds blow steady from the northeast, filling the square sails and pushing the 3 ships westward at speeds that surprise everyone. The Santa Maria, Pinta, and Nina maintain formation, never straying far from each other. Columbus has ordered that if any ship sights land, it should signal the others immediately with cannon fire and raised flags. The crew scans the horizon constantly, desperately hoping to see something other than endless ocean. By September 9th, they've sailed farther from land than most of the crew has ever ventured. The following wind is so consistent they barely need to adjust. The sails. The ships practically sail themselves westward. This should be reassuring, but instead it troubles the men. How will they sail home against these easterly winds? Columbus tells them winds blow from different directions in different latitudes. They'll sail north for the return journey and catch westerlies. But most of the crew doesn't believe him. They believe they're being carried to their deaths. Columbus writes in both his logbooks. The true log shows they're making extraordinary progress. 150 miles some days, 120 others. The false log shown to the crew reports lesser distances. September 10th, they actually travel 60 leagues. But Columbus tells the crew 48. The deception is consistent, calculated. If the men knew how far from home they truly were, panic might set in. The ocean changes. On September 16th, 9 days out from the Canaries, they enter the Sargasso Sea. Vast mats of golden-brown seaweed float on the surface, stretching in every direction. The crew has never seen anything like this. Some men interpret it as a sign they're approaching land. Surely seaweed means shallow water and nearby shores. Others fear the opposite, that they've reached the edge of the navigable ocean, and the seaweed will thicken until it traps their ships like flies in amber. Stand on the Santa Maria's deck as the ship glides through floating vegetation. The seaweed extends beyond sight, yellow-brown meadows undulating in gentle swells. Small crabs cling to the floating plants. Flying fish leap from the water. The ships push through easily, but the psychological effect is profound. They've entered a different ocean, something strange and unprecedented. Men who were merely frightened become actively terrified. Columbus maintains careful notes. He recognizes these are floating plants, not rooted ones indicating shallow water. He observes that the seaweed doesn't impede the ship's progress. He records bird sightings, birds that might suggest nearby land, but his crew sees only an alien ocean growing stranger by the day. September 18th. 12 days from the Canaries. Martin Alonso Pinzon sails the Pinta close to the Santa Maria and shouts across the water that he's spotted land to the southwest. The entire crew of all three ships rushes to the rails. There, on the horizon, a dark line that could be a distant coast. Columbus' orders course changed slightly. They sail toward what everyone hopes is salvation. Hours pass. The land refuses to come closer. As afternoon light shifts, the dark line begins to break apart. It wasn't land at all, merely clouds on the horizon, shaped by perspective into something resembling a coastline. Darkness falls with no land found. The crew's mood plummets from hope to despair. The first false sighting will not be the last. The days blur into sameness. Sunrise reveals empty ocean. The ships sail west. Sunset shows nothing but water. The crew develops routines to fight boredom and fear. Morning prayers. Work details, repairing sails and checking rigging. Meals of hardtack and salted fish. Evening prayers. Sleep in cramped quarters below deck where the air is thick with the smell of unwashed men and bilge water. Columbus barely sleeps. He spends hours watching the stars, calculating position, recording observations. He looks for signs of land, floating wood, changes in watercolor, flocks of shorebirds. Every piece of driftwood becomes evidence that land is near. Every bird sighting suggests they're approaching Asia. He interprets everything as confirmation of his expectations, because he cannot afford doubt. If he shows uncertainty, his crew will mutiny. September 25th, 19 days from the Canaries. Martin Pinzon shouts, "Land, land," again, this time with such conviction that Columbus falls to his knees and leads the crew in singing Gloria in Excelsis Deo. They've been saved. Asia has appeared. The impossible voyage has been succeeded. Dawn breaks. There is no land. What appeared as a solid coastline in evening light was another cloud formation, another trick of light and desperate hope. The crew's mood darkens beyond despair into something uglier. Anger. How many false hopes can men endure? How long can terror be sustained before it transforms into rage? Columbus notes in his journal that perhaps he should forbid men from shouting land sightings unless they're certain. But he doesn't issue this order because hope, even false hope, keeps men from mutiny. Better they believe land might appear at any moment than accept they're sailing endlessly toward nothing. October 1st, 25 days from the Canaries. The crew calculates they've sailed about 750 leagues west, roughly 2,200 miles by Columbus's false reckoning, closer to 3,000 miles in reality. By Columbus's own predictions, they should have reached Asia by now. Even his faulty geography suggested land by this point. Yet the ocean continues, unbroken, infinite. The winds remain steady from the east. This blessing becomes a curse. The wind that carried them so far from home shows no sign of reversing. How will they ever sail back to Spain? Some crew members begin arguing openly that they should turn around immediately while they still have provisions. Wait any longer and they'll starve before reaching home, even if they turn east today. Columbus refuses. He's convinced land lies just ahead. Every piece of floating vegetation, every bird sighting, every subtle change in wave patterns suggests proximity to shore. He cannot turn back when Asia might be one day's sailing away. He promises the crew they'll continue west for just a bit longer, just a few more days, just until they find what he knows must be there. October 6th. A conference aboard the Santa Maria. Martin Pinzon and other officers express the crew's concerns directly. They've sailed farther from home than anyone ever has. They've seen no land. Provisions are running low. The men are exhausted, terrified, and angry. They should turn back while return is still possible. Columbus argues for 3 more days. Give him 3 more days sailing west. If land doesn't appear, he'll turn the fleet around and they'll attempt the return journey. 3 days. Martin Pinzon reluctantly agrees, but makes clear that this is final. 3 days, then they turn east regardless of what Columbus wants. That night, Columbus writes in his true logbook. He notes the crew's restlessness. He records his own certainty that land is near. He prays for a sign, any indication that his faith is justified. The ocean provides nothing but stars and wind and endless water. October 7th. Enormous flocks of birds fly southwest. Columbus, desperate for any encouraging sign, changes course to follow the birds. Perhaps they're flying toward land to roost. This decision will later prove crucial. Had he maintained due west, he would have sailed past the Bahamas entirely, missing the islands that will save them. The winds increase. The ships surge forward faster than before, covering perhaps 160 miles in a single day. Speed that should be encouraging instead terrifies the crew. Every mile west is another mile they'll need to sail back east against these relentless winds. The impossible return journey grows more impossible with every hour. October 8th, 9th. Birds appear in greater numbers. Flocks flying overhead, shorebirds that suggest nearby land. Small fish in the water, types that prefer shallow coastal seas. Pieces of carved wood floating past, worked by tools, not naturally broken. Fresh green plants drifting by, still vital, recently detached from shore. The crew's mood shifts from despair to desperate hope. These signs must mean land is close. But they've been fooled before. They've seen phantom coastlines dissolve and celebrated premature salvation. No one dares believe too strongly. Hope has become dangerous. October 10th. 34 days from the Canaries. The 3-day deadline Columbus negotiated has passed. Technically, he promised to turn back if land wasn't found. But the signs are so numerous now, birds everywhere, floating vegetation, carved wood, that he begs for more time. Just 1 more day, 1 more night. The crew of the Santa Maria reaches breaking point. Men gather in knots, muttering angrily. Some speak openly of throwing Columbus overboard and sailing home under the Pinzon's leadership. The admiral has led them to death. His calculations were wrong. The scholars at Salamanca were right. They should have listened to the mathematicians instead of this mad Genoese dreamer. Columbus addresses the crew. He reminds them of the wealth promised by the crown, of the Asian gold waiting just ahead, of the honor they'll receive as the men who opened the western route. But his words ring hollow. Promise of future gold means nothing to men. Convinced they're about to die of thirst or starvation thousands of miles from home, Martin Pinzon intervenes. He supports Columbus's request for one more day. The signs are too numerous to ignore. Birds don't fly over endless ocean. Carved wood doesn't drift far from shore. Land must be near. One more day. After that, even Martin will support turning back. Night falls on October 10th. The moon is 3/4 full, casting silver light across black water. Columbus sleeps briefly, then returns to deck in darkness. He cannot rest. Everything depends on the next few hours. If land doesn't appear by dawn, his crew will mutiny or turn back, and his dream dies regardless. He stands at the rail, watching moonlit waves, praying for salvation. October 11th. Dawn shows nothing but ocean. Morning passes, noon, afternoon. The crew's mood is murderous. Sunset approaches and men are openly discussing turning east immediately. Columbus maintains his watch, scanning the horizon with desperate intensity. Then, at 10 in the evening, Columbus believes he sees something. A light, like a candle moving, appearing, and disappearing. He calls to Pedro Gutierrez, the king's steward aboard the Santa Maria. Does he see it? Gutierrez looks and thinks he sees something, though he's not certain. They call Rodrigo Sanchez, but by the time he looks, the light is gone. Columbus will later claim this momentary glimpse as the first sighting of land, entitling him to the lifetime pension of 10,000 maravedis, promised to whoever first spotted the New World. Rodrigo de Triana, the actual first spotter, will contest this for years. But that controversy lies ahead. The fleet continues west through darkness. The moon illuminates enough to navigate safely. Men on all 3 ships stand at the rails, staring west, hoping and fearing what they might see. At 2 in the morning on October 12th, Rodrigo de Triana, keeping watch on the Pinta's forecastle, sees something different in the moonlight. A white line on the horizon. Not clouds, something solid. He watches it for several moments to be certain, then shouts the words that change history. Tierra! Tierra! Land! Land! The Pinta fires a cannon. The signal rockets across the water. Men pour onto deck aboard all 3 ships. They crowd the rails, pointing, shouting, weeping. There, in moonlight, 2 leagues ahead, a low white beach backed by dark vegetation. Land, real land, solid earth, after 36 days of empty ocean. Columbus falls to his knees. His crew joins him. They sing Salve Regina, giving thanks to the Virgin Mary for their salvation. Grown men cry openly. They have survived. The impossible voyage has ended. They've reached what Columbus believes is Asia's eastern edge, though he's never been more wrong about anything in his life. The ships heave to, dropping sails, waiting for dawn. No one wants to attempt landing in darkness on an unknown coast with unknown reefs. They drift offshore, watching torches or fires moving on the beach. People are there, inhabitants of these lands. People Columbus expects will be subjects of the Great Khan, speaking languages his interpreter can understand. Dawn breaks on October 12th, 1492. The sun rises behind them, illuminating a small island of extraordinary beauty. White sand beaches, calm turquoise water, green vegetation, and on the shore, human figures watching the 3 ships with as much wonder as the Europeans feel. Columbus orders boats prepared. He dresses in his finest clothing, red doublet, crimson cape. He takes the royal banner of Spain and flags bearing green crosses. He is about to claim this land for Ferdinand and Isabella, about to step ashore as Admiral of the Ocean Sea, about to meet people he believes are Asian subjects of the Great Khan. He has no idea that he stands at the beginning of a catastrophe that will kill millions. No idea that he's discovered continents holding civilizations older than Europe's. No idea that these islands contain no Asian gold, no cities of the Khan, no route to the Spice Islands. But he knows he has survived. He has proven every expert wrong. He has crossed the ocean sea and found land where land was said not to exist. In this moment, as boats are lowered and oars bite water, Christopher Columbus believes his faith has been vindicated. The boats pull towards shore. History holds its breath. And on the beach, naked people watch pale strangers approach, having no way to know that their world has just ended. The boats touch sand at dawn. Columbus steps into shallow water, cape flowing, royal banner held high. Behind him, officers carry flags bearing green crosses with the initials of Ferdinand and Isabella. The moment is staged, theatrical, conscious of its historical weight. Columbus kneels on the beach, kisses the sand, gives thanks to God for their deliverance. His officers gather round. They plant the banners in white sand, and with words, spoken in Spanish that no one present except the Europeans understands, Columbus claims this island for the crown of Castile and Leon. He names it San Salvador, Holy Saviour. The Lucayan Taino people who have lived here for centuries call it Guanahani. They watch from a distance, perhaps 30 or 40 people, as confused by these pale visitors as the Europeans are fascinated by them. The Taino are naked or nearly so, wearing only small cotton loincloths. Their skin is painted red and black in patterns. Some wear gold ornaments, small pieces in their noses and ears. Columbus notices the gold immediately. Imagine this encounter from both sides. The Taino see 3 enormous vessels anchored offshore, unlike anything in their experience. Beings emerge who are pale as death, covered completely in bizarre clothing, bearing bright metal objects that flash in sunlight. These visitors make strange sounds, not any language the Taino recognize. They perform incomprehensible rituals with cloth banners and cross symbols. The Taino have cosmological beliefs about visitors from the sky. Some believe these might be celestial beings descended from the heavens. Columbus sees what he expects to see. Simple people, primitive in their nakedness, gentle and innocent in their bearing. And crucially, they wear gold, not much gold, just small ornaments, but gold nevertheless. Where did they get it? Columbus immediately begins trying to communicate. Where does the gold come from? Where are the cities? Where is the great Khan's kingdom? Luis de Torres, the interpreter, tries Arabic, Aramaic, and Hebrew. The Taino stare blankly. These languages mean nothing here. Columbus resorts to gestures. He points at the gold ornaments, points toward the horizon, tries to ask where more might be found. The Taino, eager to please these strange visitors, gesture vaguely southward. Columbus interprets this as directions to gold sources. The Taino might simply be indicating other islands, or they might be trying to send these odd visitors elsewhere. Communication is broken, misunderstanding inevitable. The Taino approach cautiously. They touch the Europeans' clothing, fascinated by woven cloth finer than their cotton. They examine the metal swords with wonder. Iron and steel are unknown in these islands. Columbus orders his men to show no weapons. He wants these people friendly and cooperative. He distributes gifts, red caps, glass beads, small brass bells. The Taino accept these items with delight, trading cotton thread, parrots, and wooden spears in return. Columbus writes in his journal that these people would make excellent servants, that they could easily be converted to Christianity, that with just 50 men he could subjugate the entire island. His mind immediately calculates conquest and exploitation, even as he marvels at the island's beauty and the Taino's gentleness. This duality defines everything that follows. Wonder and greed intertwined, paradise recognized and paradise destroyed. San Salvador is small, perhaps 12 miles long. Columbus explores its coast in the ship's boats, mapping beaches and anchorages. The island supports perhaps 1,000 Taino. They live in villages of circular houses with palm thatch roofs. They grow cassava, sweet potatoes, and maize. They fish the surrounding waters. Their culture is sophisticated in ways Columbus doesn't recognize. Complex kinship systems, astronomical knowledge, navigation across open water in dugout canoes, oral histories passing down through generations. But Columbus sees only primitive simplicity. No stone buildings, no iron tools, no horses or cattle, no written language. These people seem childlike to him, untouched by civilization. He doesn't understand that the Taino have achieved what every culture seeks: sustainable abundance in their environment. They have enough food, stable communities, rich cultural traditions. They don't need what Europeans value, because they've built something different. After 2 days, Columbus decides to search for the gold source he's convinced lies nearby. He takes 6 Taino aboard the Santa Maria, essentially kidnapping them as guides, though he tells himself they're voluntary. The 3 ships sail southwest, following the Taino's gestures toward what Columbus hopes are gold-rich islands. They discover a chain of islands, the Bahamas, each one more beautiful than the last. Beaches of impossible whiteness, water so clear you can see 60 feet down, coral reefs in colors that don't exist in European waters, fish of every shape and pattern, birds unknown to European science. Columbus names each island as he goes: Santa Maria de la Concepción, Fernandina, Isabella. He plants Spanish banners. He claims everything for Ferdinand and Isabella. He searches obsessively for gold. The Taino guides point from island to island. Columbus follows, always believing the next island will hold Asian cities, gold mines. But every island shows the same pattern. Small Taino populations living simply, wearing tiny gold ornaments, gesturing vaguely toward other islands when asked about gold sources. Columbus grows frustrated. Where are the great cities Marco Polo described? Where is the great Khan's empire? On October 28th, the fleet reaches Cuba's northern coast. This is clearly larger than the previous islands, a substantial landmass extending beyond sight. Columbus convinces himself this must be mainland Asia, perhaps Cathay itself, or at least a major province of the Khan's empire. He sails east along Cuba's coast, finding deep harbors and large Taino villages, but no cities, no temples, no evidence of the civilization he expects. The Taino of Cuba are more numerous and sophisticated than those of the smaller islands. They have larger canoes, some carved from single trees and capable of carrying 40 men. They grow tobacco, which they smoke in Y-shaped pipes inserted into their nostrils, a practice that fascinates and disgusts the Europeans. They offer hospitality, food, and information about the land, but they cannot provide what Columbus desperately seeks: confirmation that this is Asia and directions to gold sources. Columbus sends expeditions inland. Luis de Torres and Rodrigo de Jerez walk for 2 days through Cuban forests, searching for cities. They find only villages of 50 or 60 houses, where Taino greet them with honor, offering food and shelter. The expedition leaders return to report there are no cities, no Khan's representatives, no golden palaces, just people living in houses similar to those they've already seen. This news should make Columbus question his assumptions. If this is Asia, where are the cities? Where are the millions of people Marco Polo described? Where are the temples covered in gold leaf? Where are the silks and spices and precious stones? But Columbus has invested everything in his belief. His titles depend on finding Asia. His reputation rests on being right. He cannot admit error, even to himself, so he reinterprets reality. Perhaps these are outer provinces of the Khan's empire. Perhaps the great cities lie farther along the coast. Perhaps he hasn't sailed far enough yet. Perhaps the Taino are deliberately misleading him. He finds reasons why the absence of evidence doesn't disprove his theory. This psychological necessity, the inability to admit fundamental error, will drive much of what follows. On November 12th, Martin Pinzon takes the Pinta and sails away independently. He's heard rumors of a large island to the east, where gold is plentiful. He wants to find it first, claim discovery rights, secure his own fortune. This is mutiny, technically, but Columbus is powerless to prevent it. The Pinta is faster than the Santa Maria, and Pinzon has no interest in following Columbus's increasingly erratic search. Columbus continues exploring Cuba with the Niña and Santa Maria. The island's beauty astonishes him. Sheltered harbors everywhere, rich soil, dense forests, rivers full of fish, mountains visible inland. He writes that these lands are the most beautiful he's ever seen, surpassing anything in Spain or Portugal. He imagines Spanish settlements here, colonists farming these fertile grounds, treasure ships sailing regularly between Cuba and Seville. But the obsession with gold dominates everything. Every Taino he meets gets interrogated about gold sources. Every gesture gets interpreted as directions to mines or cities. The Taino, confused and intimidated by these persistent visitors, keep pointing toward other islands or inland regions, trying to satisfy the visitors' strange fixation. Columbus follows each indication, finding only more Taino villages and more vague gestures toward yet other locations. By late November, Columbus hears repeated mentions of an island called Bohio or Babeque, which the Taino describe with respect and some fear. Columbus becomes convinced this must be Cipangu, Japan, the island Marco Polo said had gold in abundance. He sails east, searching for this golden island. On December 6th, Columbus reaches Hispaniola, the island that today holds Haiti and the Dominican Republic. This is the largest island he's yet encountered, mountainous and heavily populated. The Taino here are more sophisticated, with larger towns and more complex political organization. They wear more gold ornaments than previous Taino. Columbus's excitement intensifies. Finally, he might find the gold he's promised his crew and the Spanish crown. The Taino of Hispaniola greet the visitors warmly. Their cacique, chief, sends representatives with gifts, food, cotton cloth, carved objects, and small gold ornaments. Columbus trades enthusiastically, exchanging European goods for gold pieces. The amounts are still small, decorative items, not raw gold or ingots, but more substantial than anything found previously. Columbus explores Hispaniola's northern coast through December, finding more villages, more friendly Taino, more small gold pieces. The Taino tell him, or he understands them to tell him, that gold comes from Cibao, a mountainous inland region. Columbus hears Cibao and thinks Cipangu. He becomes certain he's found Japan, or at least a major Asian colony. The fact that nothing here resembles Marco Polo's descriptions doesn't shake his conviction. On December 20th, the Niña's captain reports seeing Martin Pinzon and the Pinta at a distant bay. Pinzon has been exploring independently for 5 weeks, searching for gold. He found some, though not the abundance he expected. Now, seeing Columbus's ships, he rejoins the fleet. The reunion is tense. Pinzon abandoned the expedition, technically deserting. But Columbus needs him. The Pinta is faster than the Santa Maria, and Pinzon is the expedition's second most experienced navigator. Christmas Eve, 1492. The Santa Maria and Nina sail along Hispaniola's northern coast, while the Pinta explores separately. It's late evening, near midnight. The wind is calm, the sea gentle. Columbus, exhausted from weeks of constant vigilance, retires to his cabin for the first time in days. He orders the helmsman to wake him if conditions change. The helmsman, also exhausted, makes a fatal error. He hands the tiller to a young ship's boy while he briefly rests. The boy is inexperienced, unable to feel the subtle changes that indicate the ship is drifting. The Santa Maria, barely moving in the light wind, slides gradually toward a coral reef. Just after midnight on Christmas Day, the flagship runs aground. The impact is gentle at first, barely noticeable. But then the ship settles onto the reef as waves push her harder against the coral. Her keel cracks. Water begins seeping into the hold. Columbus rushes on deck, immediately understanding the catastrophe. The Santa Maria is stuck fast, taking on water, doomed. He orders men to cut the mast, hoping to lighten the ship enough to float free. They hack away the rigging, and the mast crashes into the sea. But the Santa Maria remains grounded. The waves, though small, push her harder against the reef with each surge. The coral rips into her hull. She's breaking apart. The Nina stands offshore, unable to approach the reef without risking the same fate. Columbus orders the Santa Maria's boats to ferry men and supplies to the Nina. They work through the night, salvaging what they can: water casks, provisions, weapons, trade goods, the ship's log, Columbus's personal effects. Everything valuable comes off before the Santa Maria breaks apart completely. By dawn, Columbus's flagship is a wreck. The ship that carried him across the Atlantic, that brought him to what he believes is Asia, lies broken on Christmas Day. The symbolism is not lost on Columbus. On the day celebrating Christ's birth, his ship has died. He interprets this as a sign from God, though he's not certain what it signifies. The local Taino cacique, Guacanagarix, sends help immediately. Hundreds of Taino assist in salvaging the wreck, helping carry supplies ashore, offering shelter and food. Their generosity moves Columbus deeply. These people have no reason to help, but they work tirelessly to save what they can from the disaster. Columbus makes a decision born of necessity. The Nina cannot carry the Santa Maria's entire crew plus her own. 45 men in a vessel built for 25. They'll never make it across the Atlantic that crowded. Some men must stay behind. Columbus proposes building a settlement using timbers from the wrecked Santa Maria. The settlement will serve as Spain's first colony in the New World and as a base for gold exploration while he sails back to Spain for reinforcements. He calls it La Navidad, the Nativity, named for the Christmas Day disaster that forced its creation. 39 men volunteer to stay. Some genuinely believe this is an opportunity, first claim on gold sources, early establishment in a rich land. Others simply fear the Atlantic crossing and prefer taking their chances ashore. Columbus appoints Diego de Arana as commander, Rodrigo de Escobedo as notary, and Pedro Gutierrez as inspector. They have supplies, weapons, and a fort built from the Santa Maria's wreckage. Columbus promises to return within a year with more ships and supplies. He extracts Guacanagarix's promise to protect the settlement and help the men search for gold. The Taino cacique agrees, though he cannot possibly understand what he's really agreeing to, the beginning of European colonization that will destroy his people. On January 4th, 1493, Columbus and the Nina depart Hispaniola, later joined by the Pinta. They leave behind 39 men, Spain's first colonial outpost, built from disaster and hope. Columbus believes he's established a foothold in Asia. He's convinced he'll return to find La Navidad flourishing, his men having located gold mines and establish trade with the Khan's representatives. He has no idea that every man he left behind will be dead within a year. No idea that La Navidad will be burned to ash. No idea that his paradise is about to become a charnel house. But that knowledge lies ahead. For now, he has 2 ships, a skeleton crew, several Taino captives, a small amount of gold, and parrots. He sails towards Spain believing he's succeeded, believing he's proven the scholars wrong, believing he's found Asia. The return voyage will be brutal. Storms, near disasters, desperate navigation. But Columbus will survive it. He will reach Spain carrying news that the ocean sea has been crossed and land found beyond. News that will change the world in ways he cannot imagine and in ways he will spend the rest of his life denying. Columbus returns to Spain in March 1493, landing at Palos after a storm-racked crossing that nearly killed everyone aboard. The reception is extraordinary. He has crossed the ocean sea and returned. He has found land where the scholars said only empty water existed. He brings proof. 6 Taino captives, parrots with brilliant plumage, strange plants, and gold ornaments. Small amounts of gold, yes, but gold nevertheless from lands across the Western Ocean. Ferdinand and Isabella receive him at Barcelona with honours beyond any explorer before him. Columbus enters the court wearing fine clothing, surrounded by his evidence of discovery. The Taino, terrified and disoriented, wear their native dress. The parrots squawk in their cages. Columbus presents the small gold pieces he's collected. He describes lands of incredible fertility, gentle peoples eager for conversion to Christianity, and proximity to Asian wealth. The monarchs are convinced. They confirm Columbus's titles: Admiral of the Ocean Sea, Viceroy, and Governor of the islands and mainland he's discovered. They authorize a second, much larger expedition. Not 3 ships this time, but 17 vessels carrying 1,200 men. Colonists, soldiers, priests, officials, and fortune seekers, Spain will establish a permanent presence in these new lands, extract their wealth, and convert their inhabitants. Columbus's second voyage departs in September 1493. 17 ships, filled with men expecting gold and glory. They reach the Caribbean in November, landing at an island Columbus names Dominica. They sail north through the Lesser Antilles, discovering new islands daily, then turn west toward Hispaniola and La Navidad. On November 28th, they reach the settlement. Something is wrong. No smoke rises from cooking fires. No colonists appear on the beach to greet them. Columbus orders boats ashore. The landing party finds La Navidad burned to the ground. Bodies lie scattered in the ruins, partially decomposed, showing signs of violence. All 39 men are dead. Guacanagarix, the Taino cacique who promised protection, sends messengers. The story emerges in fragments. The Spaniards grew aggressive after Columbus left. They demanded gold, food, and women. They split into rival factions fighting over resources. They raided other Taino villages, taking by force what they wanted. Eventually, another cacique named Caonabo led an attack on La Navidad, killing all the Spaniards and burning their fort. Columbus is devastated but not deterred. He establishes a new settlement called La Isabela 40 miles east, a proper town with streets, a church, warehouses, and fortifications. 1,200 Spaniards begin building Spain's first real colony in the New World. But problems emerge immediately. The site is poorly chosen. Swampy ground, bad water, disease-carrying mosquitoes. The colonists are wrong for the task. Gentlemen seeking gold, not farmers willing to work. They expected to find Asian cities ready for trade. Instead, they face backbreaking, labor clearing forests, building houses, and planting crops in unfamiliar soil. They sicken and die at alarming rates. Yellow fever and malaria kill men by the dozens. Food runs short. The gold Columbus promised remains elusive. Columbus proves incompetent as a governor. He's a brilliant navigator, but a terrible administrator. He alienates colonists with arbitrary decisions. He imposes harsh discipline when order breaks down. He demands the Taino provide food, gold, and labor. The gentle welcome the Taino initially offered turns to resistance as Spanish demands grow brutal. Columbus establishes a tribute system. Every Taino over 14 must deliver a hawk's bell full of gold dust every 3 months, or else receive severe punishment. But gold is rare in these islands. The Taino cannot meet these quotas. Spanish soldiers cut off hands of those who fail to deliver. The Taino flee into the mountains. Spanish hunting parties pursue them with dogs trained to kill. The Taino population begins collapsing. European diseases, smallpox, typhus, influenza, sweep through communities with no immunity. Mortality rates reach 70, 80, 90%. Entire villages disappear. The generous people who welcomed Columbus in 1492 are dying by the thousands. But Columbus, desperate to prove his discoveries valuable, continues demanding gold and imposing forced labor. Colonists grow mutinous. This isn't the paradise Columbus promised. There's no Asian trade. Gold exists only in tiny amounts. Disease kills constantly. The work is brutal. Men begin plotting return to Spain or rebellion against Columbus's authority. Columbus arrests the ringleaders, hangs some, sends others back to Spain in chains. But discontent spreads faster than punishment can suppress it. In 1496, Columbus returns to Spain, leaving his brother Bartholomew as governor. He must defend himself against complaints from colonists who've returned with tales of his mismanagement. The crown is disappointed. Where is the wealth Columbus promised? Why are colonists dying? Why hasn't he found the great Khan's empire? Columbus insists the gold is there, just difficult to extract. He insists these are Asian lands, just outer provinces. He needs more time, more supplies, more support. Ferdinand and Isabella grant him a third voyage, but smaller, just 6 ships in May 1498. Columbus sails farther south this time, discovering Trinidad and the South American mainland. He explores the Orinoco River Delta, finding fresh water pushing miles into the ocean. He realizes something extraordinary. No island produces water volume like this. This must be a continent, but his geographical framework won't accommodate this realization. He decides this must be the earthly paradise, the Garden of Eden itself, from which this great river flows. Columbus returns to Hispaniola to find chaos. His brother Bartholomew has lost control. Colonists have, divided into factions, some in open rebellion. Taino populations are collapsing. The 300,000 who lived on Hispaniola when Columbus arrived in 1492 have fallen to perhaps 60,000. Disease and forced labor are destroying them. The colony is failing, hemorrhaging people and wealth. Reports reach Spain describing Columbus as a tyrant who's mismanaged Spain's colonial enterprise. Ferdinand and Isabella send Francisco de Bobadilla as royal commissioner to investigate. Bobadilla arrives in August 1500 to find Spanish corpses hanging in Santo Domingo's plaza. Men Columbus executed for rebellion. Bobadilla interviews colonists, reviews records, and concludes Columbus has exceeded his authority and ruled incompetently. Picture Columbus, age 49, standing in Santo Domingo as Bobadilla orders his arrest. The admiral of the ocean sea, the man who crossed the Western Ocean and returned, the explorer who opened a new world to European knowledge, arrested and placed in chains. Bobadilla sends Columbus back to Spain in shackles, a prisoner aboard a ship sailing to the kingdom he served. The ship's captain offers to remove the chains. Columbus refuses. He will wear them until the king and queen personally order their removal. It's a gesture of defiant martyrdom. He's being persecuted, he believes, for his achievements. His faith never wavers. He found Asia. He opened the western route. He served Spain faithfully. That it's all falling apart must be someone else's fault. Ferdinand and Isabella receive Columbus but restore only partial favor. They remove his chains but strip his governmental authority. He can keep his titles and some financial privileges, but he'll never govern colonies again. Spain needs competent administrators, not mystical navigators. Columbus is bitter, feeling betrayed after all he's accomplished. In 1502, Columbus receives permission for a fourth and final voyage. 4 small ships, 150 men, searching for the strait he believes must connect this region to the Indian Ocean. He still insists these are Asian lands. He still believes a water passage to China lies somewhere nearby. He's 51 years old, white-haired, suffering from arthritis and other ailments. But his conviction remains absolute. The fourth voyage is a disaster. Columbus explores Central America's coast, finding no strait, only endless coastline and hostile natives. His ships grow wormy, leaking badly. In June 1503, 2 ships sink. Columbus beaches the remaining 2 on Jamaica's coast, marooned for a year with sick and mutinous crew. Supplies run low. The Jamaican Taino initially provide food, but eventually refuse further trade. Columbus, desperate, uses astronomical knowledge to secure provisions. He knows a lunar eclipse will occur on February 29th, 1504. He tells the Taino that his god will darken the moon to punish them for withholding food. When the eclipse begins precisely as predicted, the Taino are terrified. They beg Columbus to restore the moon and promise whatever food he needs. Columbus prays in his cabin until totality passes, then emerges to forgive the Taino. The moon brightens. Food arrives regularly afterward. It's a brilliant manipulation, using science as weapon. But it's also emblematic of Columbus's relationship with the people whose lands he's claimed. Every interaction a transaction. Every encounter an opportunity for exploitation, disguised as cultural exchange. Rescue finally comes in June 1504. Columbus returns to Spain in November, broken in health, his 4th voyage having found nothing of value. He spends his final 18 months petitioning the crown for restoration of his full privileges. He believes he's owed more honor, more wealth, more recognition. He writes increasingly mystical letters claiming divine purpose for his voyages. He compiles a book called Book of Prophecies, arguing that his discoveries fulfill biblical predictions and will fund a crusade to retake Jerusalem. May 20th, 1506. Columbus dies in Valladolid, age 54. He dies wealthy from the revenues his contract guarantees, but bitter about his treatment and diminished status. He dies insisting he discovered the eastern edge of Asia. He dies believing he found the earthly paradise near the Garden of Eden. He dies claiming his achievements have been insufficiently recognized. He dies never knowing what he actually discovered. He never learns that he found continents holding 30 million people with thousands of years of history. Never learns that future explorers will name these lands America after another navigator, not after him. Never learns that his voyages triggered the largest biological, economic, and cultural exchange in human history. Never learns that his name will become synonymous with both exploration and exploitation, discovery and genocide, courage and catastrophe. Consider this extraordinary blindness. The man who made the most significant geographical discovery since humans left Africa dies convinced he found something entirely different. His error was so complete, so fundamental, that even standing on South American shores he couldn't see what lay before him. His maps of the mind were more powerful than the reality his eyes witnessed. But his delusion made the voyage possible. Had Columbus accurately understood Earth's size and the ocean sea's true width, he would never have attempted the crossing. No crew would have followed him on a voyage known to be impossible. His faulty geography, his stubborn refusal to accept expert calculations, his absolute conviction despite all contrary evidence, these made him succeed where better-informed navigators failed. History rewards those who act, even when they act on mistaken understanding. Columbus was wrong about everything except the essential fact that land existed across the Western Ocean. That single correctness, achieved through comprehensive wrongness about everything else, changed the world forever. The admiral lies in his grave insisting he reached Asia. Meanwhile, ships are already sailing regularly between Spain and the lands he found. Already, other explorers are mapping these coasts and recognizing them as continents previously unknown to Europeans. Already, the catastrophic collision of two isolated hemispheres is accelerating beyond anything Columbus imagined during his 4 desperate voyages. He discovered a new world while searching for an old one. He connected hemispheres while believing he'd found a shortcut. He died wrong about nearly everything, while being remembered for being right about the only thing that mattered. The echoes of his 4 voyages are only beginning to spread. What comes next will dwarf even the achievements and horrors of his lifetime. The Columbian Exchange, DAS, the greatest reshaping of global recessions. Biology, economy, and culture in human history is about to truly begin, and Columbus, in his grave, knows nothing of it. A single voyage connects 2 hemispheres separated for 15,000 years. Consider what that means. When the last ice age ended and sea levels rose, the Bering Land Bridge disappeared beneath cold water. The Americas became isolated from Eurasia and Africa. For 15 millennia, human populations on either side of the Atlantic evolved separately, developed different diseases, domesticated different plants and animals, built distinct civilizations with no knowledge of each other's existence. Then, in 36 days, Columbus crosses the barrier. 2 isolated biological and cultural systems collide. The consequences exceed anything in recorded history. The Columbian Exchange, historians will call it the transfer of plants, animals, diseases, people, and ideas between hemispheres. It begins immediately in 1493 and accelerates through the 16th century until no part of either hemisphere remains untouched. The world as we know it today, the crops we eat, the diseases we fight, the economic systems we inhabit, all emerge from this collision. Start with the most devastating exchange: disease. Europeans carry smallpox, measles, typhus, influenza, bubonic plague, and other infectious diseases, to which they've developed partial immunity through thousands of years of exposure. Americans, having been isolated since the Ice Age, have no immunity whatsoever. When these diseases arrive, they kill with efficiency that defies comprehension. Smallpox reaches Hispaniola by 1518. Within a year, the Taino population collapses from perhaps 300,000 to 15,000. The disease spreads to Puerto Rico, Jamaica, and Cuba. By 1525, the Caribbean's indigenous population has fallen by 90%. 90%. Imagine 9 of every 10 people you know dying within a generation. Smallpox reaches Mexico in 1520, arriving with Spanish conquistadors attacking the Aztec Empire. The disease kills faster than Spanish swords. Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital with a population of 200,000, watches half its people die in a single epidemic wave. The emperor dies of smallpox. His successor dies of smallpox. The empire's social structure disintegrates as the disease kills nobles, priests, warriors, and farmers without discrimination. The pattern repeats across the Americas. Smallpox reaches the Inca Empire in 1526, traveling faster than Europeans themselves. The Inca emperor, Huayna Capac, dies of disease before Spanish conquistadors arrive in force. The empire fractures into civil war between his sons. When Francisco Pizarro invades in 1532, he finds a weakened empire already devastated by European diseases that preceded European armies. Scholars estimate the Americas held 50 million people when Columbus landed in 1492. By 1600, barely a century later, the population has fallen to 5 million, 50 million to 5 million, a 90% mortality rate across 2 continents. It is the greatest demographic catastrophe in human history. Not through war, though war contributes. Not through slavery, though slavery kills millions. Primarily through disease, invisible killers against which American populations have no defense. Understand that this is not intentional genocide, though intentional cruelties certainly occur. This is biological reality. Populations isolated for 15,000 years, suddenly exposed to diseases that evolved in densely populated Eurasian cities. The Europeans don't understand germ theory. They don't know they're carrying death. They arrive, and people die in numbers that shock even the conquistadors who came to conquer. But the exchange flows both ways. Syphilis, most historians believe, travels from the Americas to Europe with the Columbus's returning sailors. By 1500, syphilis is spreading across Europe, a new disease attacking a population with no immunity. It kills thousands, disfigures tens of thousands more. European cities implement quarantine measures. Medical texts document symptoms. Artists paint lesions. For Europeans, syphilis becomes what smallpox is for Americans, a mysterious new plague causing terror and death. The disease exchange reshapes both hemispheres, but so does the biological exchange of every other living thing. Horses arrive in the Americas with Columbus's second voyage. The Americas once had horses. They evolved here, but they went extinct 11,000 years ago. Now they return with Spanish conquistadors. Escaped horses spread across the plains. Within generations, indigenous peoples of North American plains master horsemanship. Their cultures transformed by this reintroduced animal. The horse makes buffalo hunting efficient, enables long-distance travel, changes, warfare, and trade. Plains cultures as we know them, the mounted warriors of the Great Plains, emerge from this biological transfer. Cattle, pigs, sheep, and goats arrive from Europe. These animals transform American landscapes. They provide Europeans with familiar meat, but they also overgraze native plants, compact soil, and change ecosystems. Pigs, left to forage, breed rapidly and become feral, competing with native species. The American landscape begins shifting toward European biological patterns. Meanwhile, American plants travel to Europe and Africa with return voyages. Maize, corn, becomes one of the most important crops in human history. It grows in conditions where wheat fails. It produces more calories per acre than European grains. Within a century of its introduction, maize is feeding millions across Europe, Africa, and Asia. China becomes the world's largest maize producer. African societies adopt it as a staple crop. European populations grow rapidly, fed by this productive American grain. Potatoes transform Europe even more dramatically. Originating in the Andes, potatoes grow in cold, wet conditions unsuitable for wheat. They yield more calories per acre than any grain, Irish, German, and Russian farmers adopt potatoes enthusiastically. Within 2 centuries, potatoes become Europe's most important crop. Ireland's population doubles, then triples, fed primarily by potatoes. When potato blight strikes Ireland in 1845, 1 million people starve and another million emigrate. The potato famine demonstrates how completely European survival has come to depend on this American crop. Tomatoes, peppers, cacao, vanilla, tobacco, cassava, and dozens of other American plants spread globally. Italian cuisine becomes unimaginable without tomatoes, though Italians didn't taste tomatoes until the 1600s. Thai food's heat comes from American chili peppers. Swiss chocolate combines American cacao with European sugar and milk. Irish identity becomes inseparable from potatoes, though potatoes didn't exist in Ireland before 1590. Consider how thoroughly the Columbian exchange has erased the boundaries Columbus crossed. The foods we think of as traditional to our cultures often come from the opposite hemisphere. There is no authentic Italian food without American tomatoes and peppers, no traditional Irish meal without American potatoes, no original Thai cuisine using American chilies. The world we inhabit is fundamentally post-Columbian. Our diets, economies, and cultures all shaped by transfers Columbus initiated. The most horrific exchange involves people. The plantation system develops in the Caribbean and spreads to the mainland. Sugar becomes the most profitable crop, but sugarcane requires intensive labor under brutal conditions. The indigenous population is collapsing from disease. European workers die rapidly in tropical heat. The solution plantation owners devise is African slavery. Portuguese traders have been bringing African slaves to Europe since the 1400s, but the scale was limited. The American plantation system demands slaves in numbers previously unimaginable. The Atlantic slave trade begins slowly in the early 1500s and accelerates through the 16 and 1700s. Ships transport 12 million Africans in chains across the Atlantic over 4 centuries. Perhaps 2 million die during the Middle Passage. Those who survive face lives of brutality on plantations producing sugar, tobacco, and cotton for European markets. The economic impact reshapes 3 continents. American silver and gold, particularly the massive silver deposits at Potosi in modern Bolivia, flow to Europe in quantities that double the European silver supply. This influx causes inflation, changes banking systems, and enables the first truly global economy. Spanish silver travels to Manila, where it purchases Chinese silk, porcelain, and spices. Chinese goods travel to Mexico, then to Spain. For the first time, trade routes encircle the globe. The wealth extracted from the Americas, through mining, plantations, and trade, accelerates European development. Spain briefly becomes Europe's dominant power, though it squanders much of its silver wealth on wars. Other European nations establish their own American colonies. England, France, and the Netherlands carve up North America and Caribbean islands. The race for colonial wealth drives European warfare, diplomacy, and exploration for 3 centuries. American societies that survive the initial disease wave face colonization, displacement, and cultural destruction. Spanish authorities officially abolish indigenous religions, burning codices and destroying temples. Priests convert millions to Christianity, sometimes voluntarily, often under duress. Indigenous languages begin disappearing. Cultural practices go underground or vanish entirely. Some societies adapt and survive, others fragment and fade. Yet resistance persists. Some indigenous groups maintain independence for centuries. Others blend European and indigenous traditions, creating new hybrid cultures. In Mexico, the Virgin of Guadalupe merges Christian and Aztec symbolism. In Peru, Quechua survives as a living language despite Spanish domination. African slaves in Brazil blend Yoruba religion with Catholic saints, creating candomblé. The conquered populations don't simply disappear. They adapt, resist, and transform, even as they're being transformed. By 1600, the world is fundamentally different than it was in 1492. The two hemispheres that existed in isolation for 15 millennia are now permanently connected. Ships sail regularly across oceans once considered impassable. Plants, animals, diseases, people, and ideas flow constantly between continents. The global biological exchange continues today. We're still living through the Columbian Exchange, still discovering its implications. And it all traces back to 36 days in 1492, when 3 small ships crossed the Atlantic. To a man so wrong about geography that he never knew what he'd discovered, to a collision of worlds that killed millions while creating the modern world, to a moment when isolation ended and globalization began. Columbus set out to find Asia and stumbled onto continents he couldn't comprehend. His era opened an exchange that transformed every continent, killed more people than any war, and created the interconnected world we inherit. Italian tomatoes, Irish potatoes, Swiss chocolate, Thai peppers, all fruits of Columbus's mistake. So too the Atlantic slave trade, the decimation of indigenous populations, and the colonial systems that shaped centuries of global politics. When you eat corn, you're eating a plant domesticated by people Columbus never understood, were not Asian. When you drink chocolate, you're tasting seeds the Aztec emperors reserved for nobility. When you see horses running across American plains, you're watching animals that evolved here, disappeared, and returned with Spanish conquistadors. The world's biology, economy, and culture all bear marks of that moment when the Santa Maria's lookout shouted, "Tierra," across dark water. Columbus died believing he'd reached Asia. The world knew better within decades. Amerigo Vespucci explored South America's coast and recognized it as a new continent. Mapmakers began labeling these lands America in 1507, just 1 year after Columbus's death. The name stuck. The Admiral of the Ocean Sea, the man who connected hemispheres, doesn't even get continents named after him. Yet his legacy dwarfs any naming rights. Every bite of tomato sauce, every potato consumed, every person of mixed European and indigenous or African heritage, every Spanish word in American languages, every indigenous word in Spanish, every border in the Americas, every city built on indigenous sites, every language spoken, every religion practiced, all bear the mark of exchanges Columbus initiated. He crossed the ocean seeking gold and glory. He found both, though never enough to satisfy him. He died bitter, diminished, convinced the world had failed to recognize his achievements. He had no idea that his achievements exceeded his imagination, that he'd transformed human history more profoundly than any emperor or conqueror, that he'd connected worlds and changed everything forever. 1 man, 3 ships, 36 days, and the world has never been the same.